We're excited to announce that our very own podcasting platform, Zencastr, has become a new sponsor to the show. Check out the podcast's discount link in our show notes and stay tuned for why we love using Zen for the podcast.
You're listening to the Archaeology Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to the Archaeotech Podcast, episode 112. I'm your host, Chris Webster, flying solo today. This will be a short episode because I'm talking all about the new products from Apple released in September of 2019. Let's get to it. All right, everybody, as I mentioned, Paul couldn't be on today. This is kind of a slammed-in episode because Apple always releases their September announcement when I'm doing the Reno Air Races. And if you don't know what the Reno Air Races is, because why would you? It's a air racing thing where you got 6 planes flying around pylons. It's pretty amazing. Bunch of different types of classes. But anyway, I'm in the Civil Air Patrol, and we do our fundraiser there every year, and it's our major fundraiser. Actually, we didn't do too well this year. We only made about $3,000 for the squadron. We usually make about $5,000. We're not sure why. We're looking at our metrics right now, but anyway, right in the middle of that was the Apple announcement. So I tried to watch it and take some notes because I know a lot of companies and a lot of individuals will default to Apple products, probably because of the tough nature of some of those products, because they are steel, they're not plastic. They're metal anyway, of some sort. And they're not plastic. Glass screens are better, all those sorts of things. So I'm not favoring something over another, but Apple did just have this announcement. So here we go. I'm actually sitting here looking at a pretty nice little a Samsung Note right in front of me. Anyway, let's get to it. So the 3 big product lines they released on were watch, phone, and iPad. So let's talk about the watch first. The Series 5 is out. They've released a new one about every year since they released them. And so that would be the Series 5. And each time they add incrementally little things. Well, the Series 5 itself, well, they always get longer battery life and other little incremental upgrades like the processor, things like that. There seems to have always been one little thing that they add in there that the others didn't have, which forces you to buy it. But that depends. So now they have a dedicated GPS, which gives it a dedicated compass as well, which I think is pretty cool for Apple Watch use, because a lot of times when you're out doing survey, you're walking around, you've got your phone in your pocket. Maybe you're not one of the ones that was given a Trimble or another GPS, and maybe you don't want to pull your compass out, but you've got your watch. It's got an 18-hour all-day battery life, always on display for the Series 5 anyway. And you just bring it up, bam, it shows you your compass heading. It shows you where you're going. And it's calibrated to know where your wrist is pointed as well. So it's going to show you the true compass heading based on what it's seeing. So anyway, one of the cool things is this is the first device ever where Apple has divorced the GPS antenna from the cellular antenna. What I mean by that is this used to only really be an option for iPads, really iPad minis as well. Full-size iPads and iPad minis, but I say iPad minis because that's what I've mostly used in the field. But basically, if you wanted to get GPS, the GPS chip or antenna on your device, your iPad or your iPad mini, you had to get the cellular-enabled version. And that's still true for the iPad. So however, you don't have to activate the cellular antenna. You just have to get the cellular version to get the GPS antenna. I did that for a project I was on about 5 years ago, or 4 years ago, I guess. And I bought all cellular-enabled tablets, but didn't have a single data plan on any of them because the GPS antenna still worked. It just didn't come with one unless I bought that. But now the Series 5 watch has an option, their low-end option. I say low-end, there's only 2. So there's the GPS or the cellular. And you can get the GPS-enabled watch without the cellular. So that is pretty cool because I'll tell you what, one of the series that I had for the watch, I think it was two watches ago, when they came out with the cellular antenna, I got it. It was an extra $10 on my data plan to add it to my iPhone. And I used it maybe once. I broke my phone one time and I had to use the watch pretty extensively for about 2 days. But other than that, I always had my phone on me. So I really never had to use the cellular aspect of it and really cellular data. And I think that's really for people who might go jogging a lot and they don't bring their phone or they want to bring their phone, or if you're out where in a circumstance where you don't have your phone. But to be honest, I was never in those circumstances. I pretty much always had it. So let's take a look. There's a couple other things that the new watch OS is OS 6, which is weird. There's Series 5, but OS 6. A couple things they added that are pretty cool is a decibel meter. I've been playing with that on my Series 4 today because I just installed, as I'm recording this, on September 20th. I just installed it last night. That's why I'm a little late on this podcast, because I knew the software was coming out and I wanted to install iOS 13 on my iPhone 10 and then watchOS 6 on my watch so I could really talk about them. But the decibel meter is pretty cool. They've got a new watch face that shows you constantly what the decibels are. I haven't played around with the battery life on that because I just turned it on this morning. But I would imagine if it's always listening, or maybe it's just listening when your wrist is raised and you can see the screen. But they do have a setting where it will warn you if you're in it, like it'll tap you if you're in a dangerous noise environment. So anyway, the decibel meter is pretty cool. I know we're often, especially monitoring out in situations where we're like, do I need hearing protection? Well, you can turn this on and you can see that. And if you don't have a watch, don't worry about it, because there's plenty of decibel meters for phones too, but you got to be careful because if you put a case on it, it could alter the sound that's coming into that decibel meter if your microphone is covered or even blocked in any way. Your ears aren't. Yours are wide open out there. So keep that in mind. So some other things on the watch. It's got emergency dialing, which is supposed to work way better than it did before. Let's see. The new watch series, the Watch Series 3, they always get rid of the one just before this one, but then keep the 1-2 back. You can get for $200. So if you want to get into the watch game, and you're not in it yet, for $199 at the low end model, you can get the Watch Series 3, which is pretty cool. But the watch with GPS starts at $399, and then the cellular version starts at $499. They got a bunch of new bands. All kinds of new little things. So that is the watch. For women out there, they've got this new cycle tracking thing too. I don't know anything about it. I haven't turned it on yet. And obviously I'm not going to be able to track my cycle. But apparently, looking at all the reviews, people like it. And it's accurate and does what it's supposed to do. So, okay, let's move on to, we'll save the iPhone for last. Let's move on to iPad, because that's a really quick one. So they released sort of a unstellar iPad. It's just the regular iPad. They've also got the iPad Air. They've got the iPad Pro. Yeah, and a couple other, the 11-inch iPad Pro and the 12.9-inch iPad Pro. And then, like I said, the iPad Air, and then the iPad and the iPad Mini. Now, we didn't really talk about this too much on this show, but they released, finally, after 4 years, the iPad Mini 5, which has pencil support, which is pretty great for sketching and drawing. And that came out earlier this year. So if you want to update your iPad minis, because quite frankly, if you're doing a lot of fieldwork out there and you're using something like OneNote to record your textual and photographic data, a lot of people think you need a full-size iPad, and you really don't, because they look at it and they say, well, this is the size of paper, so I may as well get this. But you really don't. Think differently. And the iPad Mini is great for this. Honestly, the iPhone is even better. If you're doing a lot of heavy sketching, like if you're out on an excavation and you're sketching unit profiles and plan views, and maybe the entire excavation or something like that a lot, then you're going to want a bigger iPad with the pencil support so you can really get those sketches down in detail. And for you skeptics that are listening saying, you'll pry my regular graphite pencil out of my cold dead hands, you really shouldn't say that until you've tried one of these things. And if a lot of complaints with, I guess, a stylus, for lack of a better word, this is really more than a stylus, but a lot of complaints are that, like, you don't get that tactile feedback. Well, I just saw, and I if I can remember it, I'll put it in the show notes, but otherwise, I just saw a screen protector offered that is supposed to mimic the feel of paper. So it doesn't hinder the look of the screen at all. You can still see through it really well. But when you're drawing on it with a pencil, it's supposed to feel like paper. So that might help out. And even if you got to change your methodology a little bit, the benefits you get from being able to isolate different lines and do different things, stuff you simply just can't do with paper. So. Okay, so anyway, the new iPad, the crazy thing about this is the iPad Mini started out at $399, the new one, but the new iPad released at $329. So for $330, you can get into a brand new iPad with pencil support. Now that's going to be the low end one with 32 gigabyte hard drive, but honestly, if you're using it for work and you're dumping your stuff often and pushing things to the cloud, then 32 gigabytes is all you need. You can bump up one and spend a little bit more money, but for $330, you're going to save that amount of time by going digital. You're going to save the money to buy that iPad in a day. Honestly, a day, maybe 2 days, depending how much work you're doing. So All right, let's take a quick break right now, and we'll come back and finish up this discussion with the new iPhone 11s. Chris Webster here for the Archaeology Podcast Network. We strive for high-quality interviews and content so you can find information on any topic in archaeology from around the world. One way we do that is by recording interviews with our hosts and guests located in many parts of the world all at once. We do that through the use of Zencastr. That's Zencastr. Zencastr allows us to record high-quality audio with no stress on the guest. Just send them a link to click on, and that's it. Zencastr does the rest. They even do automatic transcriptions. Check out the link in the show notes for 30% off your first 3 months, or go to zencastr.com and use the code Archaeotech. That's ARCHAEOTECH.
College Savings Iowa is now iSave 529, and it can do more than take your child to college. It's their passport to a bright future, because funds can be used for K-12 tuition, trade schools, graduate degrees, books, and everything they need to get anywhere they want to go. Register by September 30th at iowa529contest.com for a chance to win a $5,290 contribution. iSave 529, for every child, for any adventure.
All right, welcome back to the Archaeotech Podcast, episode 112. Chris Webster here, flying solo today for this iPhone and Apple announcement. As they're wont to do, they like to generate a lot of buzz. But anyway, so the new phone that was released this year was the iPhone 11. And before you rush out and buy it, because pre-orders went up last week and it's starting to ship today, September 20th, as I'm recording this. But before you rush out and buy it, you look at the phone that you have. I have an iPhone 10, and every year up to the iPhone 10 for the last 3 or 4 years before that, I was upgrading every year, partly so I could evaluate and report on it here at the Archaeology Podcast Network, but also for my own company doing software development and just hardware experimentation. I needed to know what they were capable of. But to be honest, the iPhone 10 was a major upgrade from the iPhone 8, which was out before that, or the 8 Plus. And I mean, they changed a lot of stuff about the iPhone 10, which is why I got it. But then the iPhone XS and XS Max that came out last year were just the normal hardware and battery upgrades with a few extra things added in. And then the iPhone 11 is honestly more of the same. I mean, they've got some pretty fancy cameras. That's probably the biggest aspect of these that has changed. But aside from that, the hardware and the tech is pretty much the same with the usual upgrades. So I'm sticking with my iPhone 10 for one more year. I went out and bought a battery case for it from Zero Lemon. It was $30 for this 4,000 milliamp battery case, which is pretty great. Let me talk about that case real quick. If you're going to go check that out, it's definitely not waterproof, definitely not dustproof. So if you're going to take this into the field, I probably wouldn't unless you're working in a pretty easy situation where none of those are going to happen. But however, if you're just plugging it back, taking your field case off and plugging this case back in at the end of the day, maybe when you get the truck or something like that, you'll have an extra 4,000 milliamps of battery power right in the case. And just for normal everyday use outside the field, it's an amazing case. It's really great. I've even dropped this a bunch of times, and the little top pops off sometimes. But aside from that, it's not broken, and it's working really well. So. All right, back to the iPhone 11. So they basically released 3 models, basically the iPhone 11, the iPhone 11 Pro, and the Pro Max. And the biggest differences between these are the cameras, the batteries, and the size. So the iPhone 11 Pro is what most people are going to look at here. And let me just go straight into price. So if you don't have an iPhone to trade in, and I'm just on Apple's website, you basically build them now. Let's look at the iPhone 11 Pro, which has the 5.8-inch display. That starts at $999. Midnight Green is a new color they've come out with, which is pretty awesome color. If you want the base model, that's 64 gigabyte hard drive, which, to be honest, is not enough these days for people who use it a lot. I have the 256 on my iPhone 10, and I've never hit capacity. So the 256 is the next one up. That jumps your price to $1149. And then if you want to go to the Big Daddy, this has more memory than my laptop does, but 512 gigabytes. Hell, my desktop that I'm recording this on, my 27-inch iMac, only has 1 terabyte, and that's half of this phone, which is a little bit absurd. The other cool thing is you can choose your carrier right here on the screen from AT&T, Sprint, T-Mobile, and Verizon, and those are all, again, it says $999 because that's what I've chosen, but you can get it unlocked and SIM-free for the same price now. So if you want to go on a monthly plan, they're all $41.62 a month. But you can just buy it outright if you got $1,000, and it's unlocked and it's SIM-free, and you can put it on any network you want. So that's a pretty cool option. Before it was really hard to actually do that. So anyway, let's talk about some features of the iPhone 11 Pro. It's just some of the basic stuff from the keynote. It's got Dolby Atmos audio, which it's really interesting that they say that, because I'll tell you what, it doesn't sound like you're in a theater. It doesn't sound like you're wearing really awesome headphones. I mean, it might be, I think the Atmos just gives it that sort of surround sound effect, which my iPhone 10 has, and that does sound really cool. But I don't know. How often are you really concerned with high quality audio and not wearing headphones? That's just my personal opinion there. Speaking of headphones, in keeping with from the iPhone 10 up, this has no headphone jack. So if you are going to use headphones, they're going to be Bluetooth. Now the cameras, dual camera on the iPhone 11 and 3 cameras basically on the iPhone 11 Pro model. So what they're adding is on the Pro, they add this telephoto that's pretty awesome and the macro lens, but they're giving you the option to take, I think it's 120 degree optical zoom out for wide shots. So if you're just standing there and you flip to the wide camera, you get so much more screen real estate, which is pretty cool if you're considering this for archaeology and looking at site overviews. Because a lot of times you have to step way the hell outside the site boundary just to get the whole thing in there. But now you can actually stay closer and get more of the site in because of this wider field of view. Now, of course, that picture is going to be a little bit different, and you're going to have to figure out how you're going to put it on your photo log. But I think it's a good problem to have. And my God, we need to get away from the 4x3 photos. We're not shooting film anymore, people. Let's have photos that match the scene that we're taking and just have our photo logs adapt. That doesn't mean take portrait photos of landscape things, which I've also seen, which is terrible. Okay, so moving on to processor speed, it's the new A13 chip. Super fast. They say it's the fastest CPU ever in a smartphone. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what they say. So faster is better, but like everything, just because they made it faster doesn't necessarily mean everything's going to run faster, because software developers are always pushing the limits with whatever chip they have. So it might be faster, but it's just capable of doing more things, and probably more things at one time. If you're not upgrading anything, you might notice an increase in speed, but in reality, you're probably just going to notice an increase in app functionality and things like that. Battery life, 1 hour more than the iPhone 10 XR, which is pretty great because this is a huge phone with sucking up a lot of resources, and yet they increased the battery life. The phone itself is water and dust resistant without a case. That's been true since at least the iPhone 10, but it's even better now. Faster Face ID, which I got to tell you, mine is pretty quick. I have the Face ID on my iPhone 10, and it's super fast. I mean, the minute I look at it, the thing unlocks. And the minute my wife picks up my phone and wants to unlock my phone, she just holds it in front of my face for a second, and it unlocks. Really just kind of passes it in front of my face while we're driving, and then it unlocks. The screen has on the iPhone 11 Pro is an oleophobic coating, which means it's supposed to resist things like fingerprints and other stuff. So they've been making those claims for a long time with different screens, but maybe this one's even better. 2 million to 1 contrast ratio in the iPhone 11 Pro, which makes the blacks black and the whites white. It makes it easier to see. The display is what they're calling a Super Retina XDR, which is just a high resolution, super bright display, which is great for working outside in bright sunlight. They've got machine learning performance, low battery usage, 8.5 billion transistors on that chip, and the battery lasts 5 hours longer than your standard iPhone. So your standard one that most people have today. That's what they're saying. I don't know what that means. Again, 3 cameras, including the ultra wide, toughest glass on a smartphone. Just running through my notes here, and starting at $999. Now, if you want to go nuts on this thing, let me go to the Apple website, and if I choose iPhone 11 Pro Max, that starts at $1099 because it's the bigger one. Space gray, midnight green. Let's do midnight green, and the 512 gigabyte memory capacity on that thing. $60.37 a month if I'm going to go with one of the carriers, for a total of $1,449. Now, that's a lot of money, but we are getting kind of to the point where a phone like this can be your only device, especially as a traveling field tech. If you want to just pull out the laptop for certain things, that's fine, but I mean, honestly, you can do probably most of what you're going to do on the phone. I mean, how many people are sitting there with their phone right now listening to this podcast? And if it's not sitting in your hands and on, it's probably nearby, and you use it for lots of different things. So when you're considering that, we don't bat an eye at dropping $1,500 on a good laptop, right? And I understand we get a lot more for that, but we don't bat an eye at it because we're used to that type of computing costing that much. Now, I know there's people out there saying, hey, I bought my laptop for $400. You're right. They do make cheaper laptops, but you get what you pay for. So anyway, thinking about that, you got to look at what you're going to use this for. Are you using it for work? Are you using it for play? Are you using it for both? Are you using it for videos and reading books on and responding to social media and even writing papers or doing whatever you're going to do? There's a lot of people that are super fast with their fingers and they can type with their fingers faster than they can type with their full hands on a keyboard. That being said, you can attach a Bluetooth keyboard to this. Spend $50 on a Bluetooth keyboard, prop this up on a stand and write a paper on it. It's not impossible. They've got Microsoft Word, Pages for Apple, spreadsheets, whatever you want to do. And with the processing speed and the memory capacity, you can literally do everything you want to do on the smaller screen. And while the smaller screen may not be the best thing for your eyes and longevity, it's pretty great if you're just using it for the field season as your primary device and you don't want to carry around a laptop. I remember the first year that I carried around a laptop while shovel bombing, that laptop didn't fare very well. Ended up ruining the hard drive and just from getting banged around because it wasn't a solid state drive. But the newer laptops with solid state drives and things like that will be better, but still dust and everything and just like moving around a lot. I'm just saying it might be better off just to simply go with a phone or even maybe the next tablet up or something like that. So anyway, I think those are pretty much the announcements. If you want to get into the iPhone 11 and not the iPhone 11 Pro, which still gives you the increased speed and battery and screen and some new cameras, you can get that for $700, $699. So let me cruise back over to the screen here and look at the iPhone 11 Pro. If you have a phone to trade in that's not very old, you can actually get this for as low as $399. Well, let's say I don't have a trade-in. They've got these fancy new colors, green, purple, the product red one, yellow, black, white. The yellow one's kind of cool. I like that. And then 64 gig is the low one at $699, and then 128 gigabytes for $749, and then 256 for $849. I always suggest getting the bigger one unless you're just going to trade it in a year. So that's $35, $37 a month at the major carriers or $849 outright. So again, got the new cameras, new sensors, just doesn't have the third camera, but still does a lot of really super cool things. So my advice is if you have an iPhone 10 or one of the flavors of iPhone 10 right now, so something in the last 2 years, you probably don't need to upgrade. All indications from the industry are that Apple is going to make a major upgrade next year. Now, they kind of said that last year and the year before, and then the iPhone 10 was a pretty major upgrade from a design standpoint, but there's a lot of cool things they're looking at. Oh, and one other thing, if you do buy the iPhone 11 Pro, and I don't know if this is just for the Pro or the Pro, like the 11 or the 11 Pro. I don't know if both of them are going to have this or not, but some people have already found some hardware inside that suggest it will be able to do wireless charging off the back, like some Samsung and Android phones can do right now, which basically means that you flip your phone over and then you can set your wireless charging headphones on there, like the AirPods, the new AirPod cases, wireless charging, or another phone. You can set another phone on there and it will charge that phone as long as it's of the same charging standard, which I think they all are these days. So that's pretty cool. People are saying the hardware is actually inside the phone to actually do that now, but they haven't turned it on yet because maybe the software's not there. Maybe they're delaying it for some other reason. Who knows? But point is, if it's not turned on or in there now, it will be for the next one, for the iPhone 12, if they come out with a 12 next year. Now, I've been hearing pretty solid industry updates, and they've been pretty close the last few years. Ever since Steve Jobs died, they can't keep any secrets. I think it'll be interesting if they go straight to a 12 next year. If they just go to an iPhone 11s, which is the usual trend, then that's typically just software and hardware again. But that's what they did this year. They had a whole number change, and then they didn't make a significant upgrade, unless they thought the cameras and the screen were that significant of an upgrade. But from a tech standpoint, I just don't know. It didn't seem like that big a deal. Now, let's jump back for the last part of this show here and talk about the iOS 13. I installed that before this podcast 24 hours ago from this recording. And that's pretty cool. They've had dark mode available on the desktop version for a little while, and now there's dark mode available on the iPhone, which I think is pretty cool, which just turns all your apps into basically a darker background with lighter text, and I think that's pretty neat. The volume is finally smart. You can see it. I totally redesigned that for the first time ever, and that's pretty cool. There's some extra features in there. that I'm still digging into. But basically, if you have probably an 8 Plus or above, I would upgrade to iOS 13 and check out the new features. If you have a watch and you want to upgrade to iOS 6, usually you have to upgrade the operating system on your phone first, because your phone is what upgrades the watch. So upgrade to iOS 13 and then upgrade to watchOS 6. And I don't know, some of those features on the watchOS are not backwards compatible because it requires new hardware. But I did, as I mentioned on my Series 4, I did get the decibel meter and that cycle tracker thing automatically download, and I'll have to look and see what some of the other settings features are for my watch. I'm willing to bet the always on display is not going to be there because that's tied to the new extended battery life and the bigger battery. So unless they change the operating system enough to artificially extend the battery by making the software more efficient, then I might be able to get that. But honestly, I don't get the appeal of the always on display. That's kind of something that the Fitbit watches and others, they're like, oh, our display is always on and it doesn't turn off. He's like, why do you want it to be on? Like, I'm getting a lot of information off my watch here. And if it were just a watch and just showing me the time, sure, I don't care. But if it's bringing up text messages and emails and other things, and I'm sitting there and somebody else across the table is just looking at my watch, maybe there's stuff on there that I don't want them to see. Because when I get a notification, it doesn't actually show up until I tilt my wrist towards me, and then it shows up. So I don't really get the appeal of the always on display, but you might get that in your updated old watch, or definitely it will be there in your new watch if you get the Series 5. Okay, one last thing. I saw that Huawei, I don't know how to pronounce that, the Huweii or whatever company, they released a new phone that's got a 40 megapixel camera. So they're calling it like the Max 30 or the Pro 30 or something like that. And their entire presentation was, had the iPhone 11 next to it. So they clearly waited until the iPhone 11 came out and then put their presentation up next to it and said, look how much better we are than them. So it does look like a pretty sweet phone, totally focused on cameras, which cameras are back in the forefront of phone design apparently, and it looks pretty neat. So if you're in the Android ecosystem, check out those new phones and go from there. So, all right, well, that's going to be it for the Archaeotech podcast. Next time around, we've got a great interview coming up that our producer set up, so we'll be back to a regular schedule at that point. It's just been a little nuts this last month or so with out of town and doing different things, and just haven't been able to get people scheduled. So if you've got a project that you're working on and there's a tech aspect to it, which I don't know what project these days don't have a tech aspect to them, even from like databases on up, and you want to come on and just talk about it with a couple of archaeologists and have a chat for about 40 minutes on something cool that you're doing, then let me know. Chris at archaeologypodcastnetwork.com. All right. We're also selling advertising, as you heard at the first break. So if you're interested in that, again, the same email address, Chris at archaeologypodcastnetwork.com. 5 cents a download, and you'll get thousands of them in just a few weeks. So, all right, that's it for this show. Thanks a lot, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Archaeotech podcast. Links to items mentioned on the show are in the show notes at www.arcpodnet.com/archaeotech. Contact us at chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com and paul@lugal.com. Support the show by becoming a member at arcpodnet.com/members. The music is a song called Off Road and is license free from Apple. Thanks for listening.
This show is produced and recorded by the Archaeology Podcast Network, Chris Webster and Tristan Boyle, in Reno, Nevada, at the Reno Collective.
This has been a presentation of the Archaeology Podcast Network. Visit us on the web for show notes and other podcasts at www.arcpodnet.com. Contact us at chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com.
Thanks again for listening to this episode and for supporting the Archaeology Podcast Network. If you want these shows to keep going, consider becoming a member for just $7.99 US a month. That's cheaper than a venti quad eggnog latte. Go to arcpodnet.com/members for more info.
This message comes from our sponsor, Teladoc Health. There are lots of reasons for wanting to be healthy. Family, work, living a fuller life. Teladoc Health understands. Whether you have diabetes, high blood pressure, or just need to manage your weight, Teladoc Health can help. Visit teladochealth.com/what'syourwhy for more information. That's TELADOC health/what'syourwhy.